All right, thank you everyone for turning up. Reagan's asked me to give a talk about how I got to be the EEVblog guy. So I guess journey, I hate that term, but you know. Anyway, as you can see, from 7-year-old hobbyist to the EEVblog. And does everyone watch my videos? Everyone's seen me, right? So nobody's turning up, right? How did I get started in electronics? I was like maybe 7, I can't remember the exact age, but I kept taking stuff apart at home, right? This is the late 1970s, okay? I'm a tad old. And yeah, my parents got sick of me taking stuff apart. Almost killed myself taking apart the television with the high tension in there. And so they decided to get me one of these things. These were the duck's guts for anyone interested in electronics back in the day. It was a science fair tandy, so you went to your local tandy store, 50-in-1 electronic kit. Has anyone ever seen or used something like this? No, you haven't. You can still buy them, similar sorts of ones. And then I very quickly grew out of this one, and so they got me the 150-in-1. Whoa, 150 different experiments, projects in the one thing. So yeah, they had all these spring terminals. So you got your resistors, you got your capacitors. Oh, CDS photo cell, I thought that was magic. Got a solar cell, that was a newfangled. 2 types of diodes, germanium and silicon, thank you very much. And this one had an integrated circuit. I couldn't believe it, right? For like a 9-year-old or something, to like an integrated, it had 3 transistors and like 5 resistors integrated into it, into a single inline package. Can you believe it? I couldn't believe it. Unbelievable. And it had a 7-segment display, transformers, and you can make 150 projects with these things. And really, for a kid that age, basically computers did exist, home computers, but like only like really rich, you know, people had those. So there was nothing to, if you were a curious teenager, or you know, in my case, not a teenager yet, this is what you did. Right? If you were curious, there was no distractions, there were no other things, you know. So you got these 150 type ones. There were other kits from Dick Smith and other places, but I had the Tandy ones. So you could build up, and the manuals for these things were absolutely fantastic. Not only, like they started off by saying, no, join this wire to, you know, here to this spring terminal. So you got bare wires, you move the spring terminal, you put them in, and you would make your circuits. But then they actually progressed to schematics. So you had to read a schematic diagram. So yeah, these things were absolutely fantastic. And then I graduated to the 200-in-1, and here's, I've still got this one, don't have the other ones, but here's my boy, Sagan, and we've done a video, I don't know if you've seen it, but we were actually built it up like 30 years later. Still, everything still works fine, and we had to troubleshoot it. Did fail, had a few dodgy connections, but that was fun. So that was my introduction to electronics. And 8, 9 years old, you start accumulating test gear, right? You can't buy the super cheap test gear you can these days, right? You can buy a $50 power supply, it does everything, right, from China. You had to build your own, right? So these came in kits, or you build them up yourself using salvaged parts. So this is my first multimeter. I saved up my pocket money to get this from the local tandy store, 20 k ohms per volt analog multimeter. Logic probe, nobody uses logic probes anymore, but logic was a big thing back then. So you use a logic probe, and it's whether or not it's high, low, pulse, and it had memory, and oh, it was great. So you started to accumulate and build your own test gear. And back then, components were expensive. You know, you can buy like bags from China of everything, right, for like a couple of dollars. Back then, they were so expensive, so hard to get, that when you salvaged equipment, you know, you find them on the side of the road, you get them from wherever, you desoldered the parts, okay? So you were that desperate for the chips, you desoldered all the chips, you desoldered the capacitors, the diodes, everything else, and you know, these are my original components, some of my original component cabinets. I still have them with the original salvage parts I got when I was like 9 or 10 years old. Like, instead, right, crazy. But that's what you had to do back then. Now you just take it for granted. You guys don't remember this, but magazines were everything back then. And I met my childhood hero, Colin Mitchell, who wrote the Talking Electronics series of magazines. So you go to the local, ride my bike every day to the local newsagent to see the latest magazine had come out. It was on the shelf. Whoa, best day ever. And back then, you couldn't get PCBs, right? Who's ordered a $5 PCB from China? Everyone, right? Like, come on, seriously, right? This one had a PCB taped onto the front. It was stapled onto the front of the magazine. This was the greatest innovation ever. And like, it was none of this double-sided rubbish, no solder mask. It was all tin plate, rolled tin plate, but you got a PCB. So I built up a frequency counter that fitted inside a cassette case. Couldn't believe it. Greatest thing ever, right? I got myself a 3-digit frequency counter, which then you can shift the digits manually. Oh, it was great. Absolutely fantastic. Can anyone imagine no internet? What would you do? Tell me. If you had no internet, how would you find information? Anyone?
Libraries?
Libraries? Yep, good. Yeah, your local library had stuff. University libraries, you happen to be near a university. I wasn't. How can anyone picture being able to do what you guys do without access to the internet? TV, yeah, but there were no TVs. You had the choice of 3 channels, and it was just, you know, the commercial.
Get lucky and know an electrical engineer.
Get lucky, know an electrical engineer. That's one way. I didn't. Unfortunately, I was the only person I knew that was interested in electronics at all. Come on, somebody's got to get it. Oh, no one's come on. You guys, you're too spoiled. This is my bedroom, right? And there's my bed there. You accumulated magazines, books, data books, okay? So these are all data books. These are all, right? That's the only way you got information. So I collected all the data books. You could often get them for free from the manufacturer, but you'd scrounge them from wherever you could. The local Dick Smith store often sold them. And every magazine, right? I collected all these magazines, got them from wherever I could. Application notes you would get. So they had all the different types of circuits. So you collect all these magazines. They were everything back in the day. And Test Gear, Volume 3, I was obsessed with Test Gear because you had to make your own back in the day, right? And the electronics magazines were everything. Electronics Australia, Electronics Today International, Talking Electronics. As I said, there was Australian Electronics Monthly. At one point, there were 5 magazines, I think, that you could go to your newsagent and buy. But that's the only way you could get information, right? There was no information. So if you didn't have your data books to know the pinouts for your chip, how they worked, everything else, you had nothing, right? So the magazines were everything. This is actually Rob Evans. I ended up working with him at Altium like 30 years later. So that was rather interesting that I picked that one. This is step 1 of how I became the EEVblog guy, how I got into this. I published stuff. I realised that, you know, the people who wrote those magazines were gods to me, right? They were like I worshipped these people who wrote these articles and thought, can I start writing and publishing articles? Could I make a name for myself? And the answer is yes, and it's very important to make a name for yourself. So I started publishing magazine articles. This was one of my big breaks. This was a digital storage oscilloscope adapter. So back in the early 90s, to turn your computer into an oscilloscope, that was a huge deal. Sold thousands of these kits. So it was massively popular. And at one point I went to a job interview. This is before the internet, right? So no, before YouTube. And I went to the interview and, hi, you know, Dave Jones. He went, are you Dave Jones who writes for EA? And I went, yep, that's me, right? Your name precedes you. So you publish stuff, you got known. Now it's easy, right? Blogs, YouTube, everything else. Blogs. Who does blogs anymore? EEVblog is the electronics engineering video blog. But that was step 1 of me. You publish stuff. And, you know, I just got a kick, right? This is hobby stuff, but I thought, you know, get my name out there. And I actually became rather famous for publishing stuff in the magazines, even though I wasn't, anyone could contribute an article. YouTube didn't exist in 2003. I was into PCB design. In fact, I was going to be a teacher at one point. A lot of people ask me, why don't I become a teacher? And technically, I was supposed to be. In the early mid-90s, can't remember the exact date, but I actually was going to teach PCB design at TAFE. And I went through all the interviews, they accepted me. I was about to start teaching and then, I don't know, something happened, they cancelled the course, something like that. So I never actually got to teach PCB design. So I wrote an article, right? There were no videos. How did you learn PCB design? You either had to do it yourself or you couldn't watch videos. There were no internet video. So I wrote an article. I wrote a 3-part article in Silicon Chip magazine. Part 3's not there, but yeah. So I became famous for the PCB design tutorial thing, and that was massively. Once that went on my website and shared around the world, and yeah, so I'm known as one of the people who help people get into PCB design. Rat's nest construction, right? When you're a kid, PCBs. Right? I did make my own PCBs. You etch them, right? Has anyone etched their own board? Yeah. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yep, okay, excellent. Good to see that they still teach it, right? Yeah, I used to etch my own boards at home. I could get down to 8 thou traces. Oh, schmick, right? But you would use ferro board, so this is all point-to-point wiring like this, just going over. There's a couple of traces that go across. I think this is Veraboard, and but generally it's all point-to-point wiring. So that's how you built projects back then. Or that was one of the methods if you didn't want to do a PCB. You're just building a one-off. Oh my God, I can't believe I found this photo. This has never seen the light of day, this photo. I don't know how old I am there, maybe 15, something like that. This is one of my early workbenches. I've got a Tandy 1000 computer. No, it must be 87 because I got my Tandy 1000 computer. That was my first computer ever, was a Tandy 1000. I designed a turbo board for that. Got that published too, by the way. That was quite popular. And yeah, so I've got an old dual channel 20 meg analog oscilloscope. Right, so that was I saved up all my pocket money, went into Dave Reed Electronics in the city and bought my oscilloscope. Oh, so proud. Carried that sucker home. Fantastic. Dick Smith soldering iron, all these are all homemade test equipment. There's one of the power supplies before, all the component cabinets, which I still have with all my salvage parts and everything. Some of them new. Analog multimeter, right? That's a Dick Smith, 100k ohms per volt for those who... You guys have no idea. Has anyone used an analog multimeter? Like in anger, you have? Well done. All right, I'm impressed. And then I was in year 10 at school and I got the dream work experience job. The Tandy factory was like the main Tandy Australia headquarters was just around the corner from my place, or it was a bike ride away. They managed to get me a 2-week work experience there repairing Tandy computers, including the Model 4 here and the Model 3s and other Tandy colour computers and stuff like that. So, that was an absolute dream experience, repairing Tandy computers. Because I didn't have one back then. I didn't have a computer. The only way I used a computer was to go to the local shop and just sit there for hours. I was that weird kid who always just hung out there all day, right? And so, yeah, that was a dream work experience job. So 17 years old, I got my first job. I've never had a non-professional job, I guess you could call it. I worked for a company called Pacific Communications, PACOM. I was a repair tech and I did some quality engineering and stuff like that. It was Z80-based security switching equipment, so it was all slow scan TV. None of this capture. You would scan one raster at a time, so you'd watch the image build up. So these were security systems back in so we're talking late 80s here. Okay, so anyway, that was a dream job. Got paid $24,000 a year. Couldn't believe it. Wow, for doing electronics. And so all I have of that are the memories. As I said, there were no digital cameras, right? There were no cameras. In researching this, I could not find any information on any of the products that I worked on back then. So I've actually done a video on this. I don't know if anyone's seen it, about pleading with people to document stuff, because at companies nobody bothers to take the effort to just document daily life at the company or stuff you're working on, things like that. Everyone's got their phone now, which I call a shoe phone. Anyone get the reference? Oh, watch Get Smart, seriously. Anyway, you document stuff, right? Document stuff, because nothing's left. I could not find a single image on all of Google of anything I worked at. Anyway, I did a drive-by, I did a walk-by of the old company that I used to work at there. That was my first job. Always have a side hustle, guys. Okay, don't rely on your job. Get stuff published so you make a name for yourself, step 1. 2, have a side hustle. I've always had a side hustle. So I used to sell software for the kids, and I used to sell kits. You'll see that in a minute. So I sold a engineering calculator program for DOS. Of course, MS-DOS. Anyone use DOS? No, nobody's used DOS. MS-DOS, right? This is before Windows. So an engineering calculator program. I sold that for $20 a pop, I think. And then one for that digital storage oscilloscope project that I showed you, I sold the software, $35 a pop for that, and I'd mail out the discs. 5.25-inch floppy discs, 3.5-inch discs, I'd mail them out. And I'd $35 a pop. It only cost me $1 to buy the disc and then to ship it for 50 cents. I was making $34 profit on each software. Sold thousands of them. Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, and since then I've always had a side hustle, right? Selling kits, software, doing contracting, which I might show you in a minute. Yeah, I sold a lot of software. This is another published project for the digital logic analyzer. This is a PDS, gate array chip. So I wrote this software. Nobody had a GUI interface for this gate array chip that you could buy that had just come on the market. So I did a GUI interface for that. And, you know, you could generate the bit files and download them. Anyway, it was rather cool, I thought. I had a software for an EEPROM burner. Somebody else published a article in one of the magazines for this EEPROM programmer software, but the software was crap. I thought it was crap. I thought, I can write better than that. So I wrote it, and mine became the de facto standard, and everyone bought this. So I sold, I don't know, 5,000 copies of this EEPROM programmer software. The other guy didn't sell any. So sorry, dude, but he ended up actually reviewing my software and comparing it with his in a future article, and he just admitted, yeah, just buy my one. And then I did an IC tester as well, so you could actually test the ICs when you desoldered them from the products, as I said, to, you know, you could, if you reuse your chips. And I sold lots of kits. So this was one of my side hustles. So, you know, a calculator watch, old frequency generator kits, video overlay kits for analog security systems and stuff like that. So I sold lots of kits. I've been doing that since I was in my late teens. So, and then I did contracting. I was able to find my original invoice state. How trashy is that? Who remembers 7-digit phone numbers? Anyone? They used to be in Sydney, 7 digits long, right? I had, like, that's an original 7-digit phone number. And yeah, I couldn't believe I found this. And then, g'day. And then who remember, before the internet, okay, another way you got information is by polling fax machines. Has anyone ever used a fax machine? Oh, yeah, one person used a fax machine. 2 have used a fax machine. Nobody uses them anymore. I had a dedicated line at my house with a fax machine. This is before the web, and I'd have my price list in there of all the products that I sold and stuff like that. So you could load in, you could scan in up to 5 pages, so you could have 5 web pages in your fax machine. And my phone was just all day. I had to shut the thing up. It just ringing. People would call up my fax machine, and then it had this polling mode, and it would automatically download those pages and print them on your end. So that was the early. It wasn't really the web, it was just like, you know, but anyway, that's how I shared information, my latest info, my price list. I found one of my original price lists there. How did I become the EEVblog guy? I think we're closing up now. I've got like 1 left or something. I've always published stuff, as you've seen, right? Started out with the magazines. Then it went to the web, right? And it became famous for this. Something, it's not the fame, it's just I enjoyed doing it, right? I enjoyed passionately sharing my projects and my love of engineering with the world, right? Magazines, then the web. 3 was that YouTube was around. It'd been around for 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years. And, you know, people were starting to do blogs and stuff. Text blogs were a big thing. I went, why text blogs? I've already got the website, right? So these video blogs started up, people doing personal video blogs. And nobody was doing engineering video blogs. And I went, whoa, maybe I could, like, oh, I'm passionate. So I grabbed a camera, a 320 by 200 webcam, because that's all I had. Has anyone seen my first video? Oh God, it's embarrassing. Oh my God. Here's another rule, right? Don't be embarrassed to release something, to publish something, to do something. It doesn't matter, right? And that, if I sweated bullets over whether or not I would release that first video. I thought it was awful, right? It was all my videos are unscripted. I just press record and start yapping away. 10-minute time limit back then. And so I thought, oh, screw it. So I uploaded it to my personal YouTube channel at the time, and then Usenet. Nobody uses Usenet, right? Usenet, it's an old bulletin board kind of system on the internet. It goes back to ARPANET days and all that sort of stuff. So I was on the Oz Electronics news group on there, so I put my video on my personal website, and I went, here's a link. I started this video blog, and I got 50 subscribers. 50 on the first day. I couldn't believe it, right? Fit everyone on the Oz Electronics forum. When's the next video? And I went, next one, okay. So then I started numbering them, number 2, okay. So I talked about burden voltage and I don't know, HP multimeters, and then I told some work experience stories about anti-static stuff and more reviews. Back then the blog was like a mixed thing, but so I had like 4 different segments in the one video, but that didn't last long. 20 videos or something, then I focused on one thing per video. But that's how it started, in my garage lab, and it just kept growing. I thought maybe, I get 1,000 subscribers, right? That'd be like fantastic. How many people want to watch just a nerd talk about electronic stuff, right? But it just kept growing and getting more and more popular. Within 5 or 10 videos, the industry recognised me. I was the only guy doing this, and they'd start sending me multimeters and products to actually review. And, I thought this was great. So, yeah, I just started publishing stuff. It was the 3rd step in publishing stuff. I just happened to be one of the first to do it. And then, back then you didn't make money. Of course, there was there's no money to be had. There was no monetization. Nobody made it. You did it for the passion. Now, a lot of people do it for the money, but I don't. You can ask me later how much you earn doing. It's not much, even after 14 years. So after 2 years of doing that, Altium actually retrenched me, right? They packed up, moved to China, dumbest move ever, right? And so I was one of the outspoken guys, so I went, right, as did most of the hardware group eventually. So they sacked 1/3 of the company, and 2 weeks away from our first baby to lose my job, lose my full-time job, and I went, but I've got 10,000 subscribers. I can do this full-time. I can become Australia's first full-time YouTuber. I don't think anyone was full-time back then. She went, no. She looked at how much it was, no, go find a real job. So, yes, so I didn't try too hard, but I picked up a contract job working for the cochlear implant. Everyone knows the cochlear implant, right? So I did some design work on their new generation thing. That lasted 9 months, maybe. And then, so this is my home lab where I put my tripod here and I just shot my videos here. And then I decided, no, once again, I want to do this full time. So either continue doing contracting. So I thought, okay, how can I make this a full-time thing that'll keep the wife happy? So that, new baby, I can be home, I can work on this whenever I want, perfect opportunity. I still had my side hustle, right? Still had the kit business, always had that side hustle, right? So if your job goes, you're still bringing in money. And then a company approached me and wanted to advertise on my forum. And they asked me how much to advertise. I had no idea how much ads cost, right? I had no clue. So I worked out how much I was making from the kits and things. And I went, well, what's a full-time engineering job worth? And I split the difference. How much do I need to make that? And I told them that, X amount divided by 12, how much I needed per year. And they went, yeah, okay. Boom! I'm a full-time YouTuber, right? I'm one of the first in the country to become a full-time YouTuber. Bang! So I went, I can't do this garage crap anymore, right? So I purchased a 50 square metre office, best investment ever. Paid $195,000 for it, took it out of our home loan. Big gamble at the time, but, best thing I ever did, right? So I'm still in that 50 square metre lab. That's just me setting it up originally. That's it. That's how I became the EEVblog guy. So that's okay. Camera's still rolling. Battery's still good. This is good. Let me get a drink. Who's got questions?
At what stage did you learn more the deep parts of electronics, like op amps and things that can be kind of conceptually hard to understand, like formulas and stuff? At what stage did you learn that?
This guy, Colin Mitchell, absolute god to me when I was a kid. He still has one of the best websites. It's all text-based, HTML, but the amount of information on there and tutorials for all sorts of circuit elements and stuff like that. Or you read them in the magazines. You read the circuit theory and techniques. It's not there, but all these magazines, circuit theory and techniques, right? All this sort of stuff, and they'd often go into the theory, right? It's not just a cookbook. You can get stuff that went into theory. So yeah, through the magazines, which I had, right? Because you couldn't get online information. So it was all through the books and magazines that I actually, data sheets, application notes. Some of the best info is in the application notes from the chip manufacturers. The best stuff. So that's where you learn things like that. Yeah, so I was 9, you know, something like that.
When you were like starting up, when you were young, like selling all your kits, did you ever have to like go out of your way to like market it to people, or it just sort of got spread around?
No, yeah, publish it in the magazines. It sold itself. It sold itself. Like I would put my physical address in there. They'd send me money orders, right? You know, money. You go to the, you know, because there were no credit cards. Well, very rare, but you know, so they sent money orders. You go to the post office, you get a money order. Then they'd mail that to me. Then I had to walk into the post office and I had to cash my, you know, $35 mail order. Here's, you know, you could buy things with stamps. Colin Mitchell, who I showed, the Talking Electronics magazine, he sold hundreds of thousands of kits, right? You could buy the kits from him. He accepted stamps as payment, right? So as a 10-year-old kid, to buy a kit from him, I went into the post office to buy stamps, physical stamps, and I'd send him the stamps, which then I bought a product from him using stamps as currency. Like, you know, it was, yeah. So it was weird back then. And yeah, and I would there was no email back then, so I'd have to somebody wrote me a letter. I wrote a letter back. I started handwriting stuff. They got boring, so I started printing them out, typing them. Eventually, and then I lick the mail and lick the stamp, send it back, and that's how you corresponded with people. So, yeah. Anyway, yep.
How on board were your parents with all these adventures?
My parents just didn't care as long as I kept to myself, you know, like, but yeah, I was very distant. I wasn't, you know, I was like, I locked myself in my shed. There is a photo, I couldn't get a photo inside, and could not find a photo of inside my shed. I had a garden shed, and that was my lab. And I just spent all day and all night out there. I wouldn't eat inside. I'd take my food and go out to my lab. That's what I did. You know, I was just that nerdy kid, you know, I wasn't that good. They were fine with it, you know. But yeah, they just didn't understand it at all. So, yeah. They did buy me my first computer because we were dirt poor. And they bought me the Tandy wasn't there. That Tandy 1000 computer back in the late 80s, and that was a huge game changer for me. I don't know how they afforded it, seriously. Well, because it was old. It was on massive clearance special. It was really old, original ROM BIOS 1.00. That's how old it was. So it was old stock, Gather Dust or something in the warehouse. Anyway. That was a big deal.